You know, I'm not familiar with this game, but I hope that Akumu is playing as All for One because the personality tie-in would be so perfect, I could laugh myself to sleep tonight.
I've watched these videos dozens of times. Dozens is probably an exaggeration, probably around 5-6 times each, so that I could make my responses to them, and I completely missed the fact that she compared me to All for One. It aged like a fine wine, considering as of this year currently, that show is animating the part where All for One completely humiliates all of the good guys. I wish I was making this up, but they dogpile him in an attempt to stop him, only to get fucking obliterated. Such poetic irony. But I'm making this video because this is an opportune moment to make a point about these people and their communities. One of the earliest things that I noticed about these people is their propensity, their habit of LARPing as anime characters. They have a very childish sense of morality, a very passionate autistic idea of justice. That's why they do the internet justice crusading and the call-out culture that Ponder wants to talk about, even though she herself has constantly partaken in this call-out culture. One of the earliest things that I did that essentially started all of this was the Light Yagami LARP to mock them for their constant fucking crusading and the way they were going about the Madame drama. The constant fucking speeches about moral standards that none of them even remotely believed in, and they would proceed to prove that very few of them in their community remotely believed in that shit, Ponder included. These people have this very childish and immature idea of what morality is. They present it unironically black and white, which is something that they wanted to accuse me of during the Light Yagami LARP. And yet the entire time with me, they've tried to present this situation as good and bad, and tried to force people into these dichotomies of this person is the good person, this person is the bad person, and whoever they deem the good guy gets a fuck ton of leniency and excuses, despite the fact that they'll go and do something that they previously condemned the supposed bad person for. And you can see this childish idea of morality, this black and white good versus evil sort of dynamic that they want to set up and force onto any situation with individuals like Lao Convoy. He heavily clings to his 80s cartoon idea of morality. There's a clip out there of him going on about how people grew up on these cartoons that were to instill morality into them, and yet somehow don't reflect those very morals that they grew up on in those cartoons. It's really silly. Another example would be in the Senate, the gallery context chat during the Nezzie monster call. That is ripe with this very same thing that I'm talking about. From perfected UI Joker, at Wrath, stop being drawn to drama like a fly to a bug zapper and just let go. All this stems from you being hostile towards other people for whatever reason. Like you want to act all high and mighty towards others, even as an adult. You want to bring old things up just because you didn't like the outcome, because you want to zerk off to drama and causing trouble. You just don't know when to admit defeat, nor do you understand how to just leave things buried. I mean, what'll happen if you end up doing something like that in a job towards your coworkers or an interview? What happens if it pops up in a job interview? You probably lose your job or not even get one. In summarization, grow up. And this comes from a sense of people they don't like. They just immediately say are immature and haven't grown up and so on. They constantly do this, mind you. There's a comment that I recently got a couple of weeks back from some guy named Dreamer, who was essentially saying the same thing here, claiming that I haven't grown up and that I haven't matured solely because I'm not a giant titty baby and because I say mean words, and then proceeding to say that I'm a bad person and a prick. But to continue through this gallery context chat, just to give you an even further look as to what I'm talking about here. In my conversation with Heaton Mitsuru after the call, her totally not embarrassing means of defending herself for accusing me of attempting to dox a minor. At one point, Heaton called me a snake, and I clarified that no, it was her friends who were the snakes, and that there was only one who I went out of my way to start shit with, and that was Doodles. Someone else who was hopping into the conversation in an attempt to defend Heaton, perhaps salvage the conversation from looking as bad as it was, then said, "And you think this makes you a good person? Question mark, question mark, question mark." And I clarified no. In no part of the conversation did I argue I was a good person, let alone a bad person. Or better yet, you can take a look at the SCC calls, where they also start accusing other people of acting like anime characters giving anime monologues, despite the numerous anime-esque, morally sanctimonious fucking monologues that they give in those calls. And an even better example, actually, and one of my all-time favorites, is the same guy that I just showed you, the perfected UI Joker, and his long thing telling me I needed to grow up, proceeds to give a speech in one of the calls, nearly identical to the hero speech from Deadpool that Colossus gave.
Want to act like a hero, trying to be Donnie's knight in his shining armor. But here is something that should be important. A hero doesn't always do a grand battle. Sometimes they do small things, like getting cats out of trees when they're stuck. That is a very small thing, but it's a very good thing to do. And this was just a cat stuck in a tree. And instead of just trying to climb up the tree with a ladder or something to try and get the cat down, you tried to chop the goddamn tree down!
I was actually there in the call for that part. I believe I got kicked from the call for even vaguely suggesting and pointing out the irony, and even remotely entertaining this in what's supposed to be a serious, confrontational call. But the same exact fucking Spurg, just a couple months before, that was telling me to grow up, was giving this speech about what a hero should do. But we can go even further back to show how rampant of a problem this is. There was Fuchsia Butter who compared me to Lord Voldemort, or at the very least, it referred to me in the same way that they referred to Lord Voldemort. Or if we go even further back to the Light Yagami LARP, this community then tried to turn my mocking of them into a mock and insult of me by calling me Light Yagami, or saying that I think of myself akin to Light Yagami, or Light Yagami Kenny. You can probably find thousands of comments exactly like that across my channel and plenty of others. They can't help themselves. It's this cognitive dissonance that I've been talking about throughout the series. They act like anime characters themselves with this ridiculous idea of fucking morality that's out of a fucking comic book, but then at the same time love to talk about how everyone else is exactly that same way whenever it's an individual they don't like. And then when I entertain this kind of thing, and I have fun with it, I'm the problem. A really good and easy example to show you that you're not allowed to have fun with the pretentious anime comparisons, but they can keep doing it, is actually from 2020. In September of 2020, I made a pretentious tweet comparing what the FCK and their dogpiling was to some weeaboo shit from Naruto. Madara versus some giant fucking army. And I made the comparison that they were the giant army, dogpiling one individual, and that I took them all out. They didn't particularly like this, the name's Junkie specifically, so he quote retweeted me and turned it into a copy pasta for the Art and SCC to then partake in mocking me. Several people within the slideshow commentary community took part in it. Avi or AO Speedwagon, Mr. A and Mario, Renmankins, who was going by Jesp at the time, and many more. Which is really interesting because when they get mean tweets made at them, it's harassment, but then when they're partaking and dunking on one individual, suddenly it's different when they're doing it. But regardless, they proceeded to make it a sort of running gag. But my question is, was I wrong? Look at how things are now. And I was happily flaunting the fact that I was a pariah. Kai, and especially Linlen, were throwing a fucking tantrum. I mean, multiple tantrums on Twitter, because I happily accepted the fact that I was a pariah. You see, you're not allowed to have fun with it. You're supposed to take them literally, and they can compare you to all kinds of villains, and so on. These people in these communities believe that they are inherently good people because of their politics, because they don't say certain mean words, and because someone they don't like says mean things and so on, they're inherently a bad, evil person and comparable to any sort of villain that they want to compare them to. People who are so immature that they can't grasp the idea that things aren't black and white, they constantly have to force things into a good versus bad dichotomy, are the ones that LARP as the more mature individuals, and those who aren't like them are the immature ones who haven't grown up. This is something I've dealt with numerously. You can go and see this in Ponder's comment section, people returning to our videos to proclaim that I've never grown up, I haven't matured, and so on, all because I have not conform to their ways. I have not become a whiny little bitch that wants to language police and pretend as though I believe in certain things that I don't. They think that I need their approval to grow, to mature, to continue, and to flourish. And the fact that I don't have their approval but continue to move forward, it eats at the back of their mind. Because I'm the bad guy. And the reason they do this is for two reasons. They need to tell themselves and reaffirm to themselves that they're a good person, that they're doing the good thing, because they have the approval of the majority and are taking part in what the majority are doing. So that helps to reaffirm that they're the good guy. And secondly, they need to believe that I'm going to get my dues, that there's going to be some ultimate consequence to me or people like me for being unapologetically honest and open about our opinions. That's why Perfect UI Joker had, mentioned the whole stuff with the job, and that I needed to accept the outcome, my L. I needed to take the L. They've been doing this a long time now on my channel, consistently telling me that I was actually the one who lost, not the FCK, because they think that their consensus decides the fate of something. They've convinced themselves that they decide the outcome. And also going on and on about how I should delete my channel, move on, that my credibility doesn't exist, that I'm fucked, that I'll never be able to have a job. Or how about, again, the Dreamer comment individual, going on about how I won't get far in life, that I'm going to learn the hard way if I continue to treat people like this, that I have this being a bad person makes me superior ego, and that I need to learn to be a better person, that they can't sway me away from my self-destruction, and that they hope I'm rich and famous enough to get away with it, else they'll warn me to stay away from people forever. They say this really over-the-top and sentimental bullshit. They talk about how I won't be able to have a job. They talk about how this is going to negatively impact me, how I'm being self-destructive with this, and so on, because they need to tell themselves, they need to believe that there's going to be an ultimate consequence. That's why they latch onto this childish idea of fucking morality. I'm a bad person, so I'm going to get my dues by the good people. Life is going to give me its dues. Life is going to come at me fast, and I'm not going to see it because I'm too busy sowing the seeds of evil, permeating my vitriol. But I'll happily accept being cast as the bad guy, the villain. Not only because it looks really ridiculous to people that aren't in your community looking inwards, but also because real life isn't a comic book. It's not a movie, it's not a game. The good guy doesn't always win. The supposed bad guy doesn't always lose. But that's why they don't really live in the real world. They live in these tiny little social niches, these little hug boxes that have to force this idea that this is what's going to happen, that I'm not going to be able to have a job, that I'm not going to get very far in life, that I'm not going to be successful, and I can't be because I'm the bad guy. But all of that aside, it's a pretty interesting way to insult someone, to compare them, let alone when they were 16 years old, to the big bad villain, personality-wise. The same community that insisted that they couldn't take me seriously were at the same time setting up this idea that I was their boogeyman, their Satan, their antithesis, their very own leader that they blindly worship and are incapable of providing criticism towards, let alone accepting the fact that they fucked up, set this up. And it aged like fine wine, considering that the dog pile, well, just as I said it would when the dust settled, it wasn't going to end the way they wanted it to. But what I'm really curious about, Ponder said that she could laugh herself to sleep knowing that.
Because the personality tie-in would be so perfect, I could laugh myself to sleep tonight.
I wonder if that applies to now, if she could laugh herself to sleep now. And again, if we think about what's gone on so far with Ponder, she's resorted to hypocrisy by banning me from her comment section so no one can see my comments. And the only thing that she said about it publicly is that I'm going about this in a destructive way. So something tells me she's not laughing about it now. Oh, hold on. One last thing before I return to editing the FCK Maxim. I was playing All for One.
オルフォーワンが消えるまで抑え続けろクレスが